Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to Kardec Radio. Welcome to our weekly program every Sunday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're live broadcasting from Northern California, Divine Light Spiritist Group, and we are talking about miracles. We're leaning our study on the book Genesis by Allan Kardec, and it is the chapter that's entitled Miracles. In the last few weeks, we've already talked about what is a miracle and what's not. We busted some myths about miracles. And last week, we worked through the universal cosmic fluid, also called the divine plasma, by André Louise. And today we will be talking about the formation and the properties of the Perispirit. In order to facilitate our study, we will be pulling out a little PowerPoint to make the points a little more clear, because we know that the study is pretty intense and we want to make it as easy and easily understandable as possible, dear friends. Also, now I'm already in the share mode, but I want to say I saw some of your friends joining, and feel all hugged and welcome. And later on, I will say hello to each and every one of you personally. But in the meantime, thank you for joining. And please post your questions and comments and additions in the comments, under the comments, and we will be looking at it. So let us go into slideshow. And I will be quickly checking to see whether you are actually seeing this particular program correctly.
Can anyone give?
So let me see real quick here. Go to Kardec Radio. And yes, it looks pretty good. All right, friends. So we're talking today about items 7 through 12. But for a moment, before we go into the Perispirit, let us back up to last week. And we're just picking out one particular slide, one particular piece of information, which is really at the core of the fluids, and that is the universal cosmic fluid. There is two states, main states of the universal cosmic fluid, which I abbreviated with UCF. There is on the one side the etherealized state, and on the other one the materialized state, which is listed here as etherization and materialization. Now, what does etherization mean? It means that we can't weigh the fluid, can't see it. Most of us cannot see it. It is too fine. It is too fine in its consistency. However, on the material side, it's ponderable. That means it can be measured. Consequently, natural science deals with it and can deal with it. So under the etherization or imponderability of the universal cosmic fluid state, we have the invisible world, the world of the spirits. The universal cosmic fluid finds itself in its natural or normal primitive state, in the imponderable state. That's the natural, the normal, the primitive state. And then all the consecutive states of the universal cosmic fluid, they become ponderable. So the consecutive state to the ethereal state of the universal cosmic fluid is the ponderable or materialized cosmic fluid. First imponderable, then ponderable. And we said that the imponderable state belongs to the invisible world, whereas the ponderable state of the universal cosmic belongs to the visible world. And consequently, on the left side of the slide, you see the imponderable state. And since it belongs to the invisible world, it touches on the spirit or the psychic phenomena. And now we're finally reaching Spiritism. This is where Spiritism comes in, because a lot what fell under the etherealized state of the universal cosmic fluid, which fell into the invisible world, into the spirit psychic phenomena, were called miracles because nobody was able to explain them. Those phenomena were not explainable in previous days, in previous times. Then came along Spiritism with thanking God and started to develop new laws and explained the phenomena. Consequently, the minute we can explain a phenomena or we can recreate a phenomena, it is not a miracle anymore, per definition. So then we have the spiritual fluids that fall under the etherealized state of the universal cosmic fluid. And that is what we're talking about today. Spiritual fluids, and under that, the perispirit. So, item 7, we're finding ourselves on page 285, items 7 to 12. We're going to talk about, we're not going to read all of it, but most of it, picking out some highlights, which we then also put into this PowerPoint. We're now at item 7. The perispirit, or the fluidic body of spirits, is one of the most important products of the universal cosmic fluid. So we know what the perispirit is, right? The perispirit is the body, the fluidic body that surrounds the spirit. The spirit and the perispirit travel from lifetimes to lifetime, go into the spirit world, from the spirit world into new incarnation, from different worlds to different worlds, depending on where the spirit needs to dwell for its development. When we're incarnated, we are a spirit with the perispirit, and we have this physical form. The physical form falls off. When we discarnate, what's left is the spirit and the perispirit. And now we're learning that the perispirit, which is the fluidic body of the spirit, is one of the most important products of the universal cosmic fluid. It is a condensation of that fluid, of the universal cosmic fluid, around a focal point of intelligence, or we also call the soul. So the perispirit is a condensation of the universal cosmic fluid around a focal point of intelligence, which is the spirit. He calls it the soul. Now, Allan Kardec defined that the word soul is being used for an incarnated spirit. Once the body falls off, he called the spirit again spirit, not soul any longer. So that was a distinction he made. But why is the perispirit a condensation around a focal point of intelligence? When we go to the Spirit's book, we learn, Allan Kardec wondered, what is a spirit? How can we define a spirit? And the answer from the spirits on high was that the spirit is the intelligent principle of the universe. Consequently, it makes sense that the perispirit is a condensation of the universal cosmic fluid. It's a part of the universal cosmic fluid around the focal point of intelligence, because that's what spirits are, the intelligent principle of the universe, right? So let us continue. We have already seen that the corporeal body also has its origin in the same universal cosmic fluid, condensed and transformed into tangible matter. So not only the perispirit stems from the universal cosmic fluid, but also our physical body. In the perispirit, the molecular transformation operates differently because the fluid retains its imponderability and ethereal qualities. So in the state of the perispirit, the universal cosmic fluid retains its imponderable state. So if we go back, and we'll see on the left, the imponderable, one of the states of the universal cosmic fluid on the left, is imponderable, falls in the invisible world. Spirit, psychic phenomena, spiritual fluid. It is the fluidic body of the soul. Consequently, the perispirit would be added to the left side. I hope for you it's the left side too, of the universal cosmic state. Left side under etherization, right? So that's where the And of course, our physical body would go on the right side under the materialized state of the universal cosmic fluid. The perispiritual body and the corporeal body thus have their source in the same primitive element. Both are matter, although in two different states. So he's saying again that the perispirit and the physical body have their origin in the universal cosmic fluid, which is the primitive element, the primitive form of the universal cosmic fluid, the original form. However, they're both matter, but in two different states. So here we have the corporeal body has its origin in the universal cosmic fluid as well. Spirit extracts its perispirit from the environment it inhabits, from the environmental fluid. Well, actually, that's going to be item 8. So let us go to item 8. Spirits extract their perispirit from the environment in which they find themselves, which means that this envelope is formed from environmental fluids. So when we dwell on planet Earth as an incarnate, we draw as a spirit our perispirit from the environmental fluid of Earth. It's still a form of the universal cosmic fluid, though. But now we're learning that every planet also has its environmental fluid. However, it's another, it derives from the universal cosmic fluid. The result is that the compositional elements of the perispirit must vary according to the different worlds. Makes sense, right? Since the spirit extracts its perispirit from the environment it inhabits, which is from the environmental fluid that is specific to every single planet. Consequently, as a consequence, we can say that the compositional elements of the perispirit varies according to the different worlds the spirit finds itself in, right? It's very logical. So this was item 8. Now we're moving on to item 9. So I'm going to quickly look and see whether anyone has a question, because I feel a little detached here from everything. Let me see whether anyone had a comment so far. I can't see it while I'm in this mode. 4 comments. All right.
Additions in the
comments.
Okay.
Okay. It's all hellos. Hi, Tony. Hi, Victoria. Hi, Nora. Hi, Monica.
I can't see it while I'm
Okay.
in this.
All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate it. All right. So let us continue. Item 9. The nature of the fluidic envelope, which is the perispirit, always has to do with the spirit's degree of moral advancement. So the nature of our perispirit, of our fluidic envelope, the fluidic envelope of our spirit, depends on our degree of moral advancement. We are spirits, right? It depends on how dense or less dense it is. It relies on our moral advancement. Less evolved spirits cannot change envelopes at will, and consequently cannot go from one world to another at will. So as long as we're dwelling on Earth, we don't have the capacity to change our perispiritual envelope by will. We see that very clearly in the André Louis series. How often does André Louis and his team of mentor spirits go to lower spheres, and in the process of going into the denser realms, also earth realms, they change their perispirit. They have to, in order to be able to dwell in those zones for a certain period of time. Since André Louis and his mentor spirits are of a higher nature, they can do it. However, higher spirits can always go down to lower worlds and change, as we just learned, their perispiritual, the nature of their perispirit. However, the lower spirits cannot do that. There are some whose fluidic envelope, even though quite ethereal and imponderable with respect to tangible matter, is still very heavy. So there are some spirits who still have very heavy envelopes. In this category, one must include those whose perispirit is so dense that they confuse it with their corporeal body, and who, for that reason, believe they're still among the living. Now, this is something he's talking about discarnated spirits right now. So, there's some discarnated spirits whose perispirit is so dense, because of their moral development, the state that they're finding themselves in upon their discarnation, that they confuse their perispirit with their physical bodies. And we've studied for many, many months, I think for a year and a half, all the cases in heaven and hell, which you can find on Kardec Radio. And there we found most of the spirits after the discarnation were very confused. They didn't know whether they were incarnated or discarnated for exactly that reason. And there were all the spirits, most of the spirits, in the categories of unhappy spirits, hardened spirits, repentant spirits, those whose life was rather material. Their moral advancement was on a lower level. So these spirits, and there's a great number of them, whose perispirit is still very dense, remain on Earth's surface like incarnates, believing they're still minding their earthly concerns. And those were those spirits who sometimes they discarnate with addictions. They hang around us and they whisper addictive thoughts into our minds. They're the ones who are very attached to their homes that they left behind, or families. And then they sometimes become obsessive spirits and they hang around Earth. They can't elevate. They're not elevated enough yet to move on because of their density, the density of their perispirit. Highly evolved spirits, on the other hand, Allan Kardec says, can go to lower worlds and can even incarnate on them. So here we see the difference. When we're morally less advanced and our perispirit is consequently very dense, we get confused when we're discarnated and we hang around Earth. We cannot go just because we want to or get the idea of going to a higher world. We can't do that. However, the higher spirits, again, have complete free will in that matter and in many others. We said it, can go to lower worlds. They draw from the compositional elements of the world. They enter the materials to form the fluidic or corporeal envelope that is appropriate to the environment in which they find themselves. So let us back up. So let us take it one step at a time. So we know the lower spirits, they hang around Earth because of their dense envelope. The highly evolved spirits, they can choose. They can go up to higher, or they can also hang worlds, or they can hang around Earth. When they descend down into lower realms, into denser realms, then the spirits draw from the compositional elements of the world. Let's say if a spirit comes down to Earth, it draws from the compositional elements of Earth. They enter the materials to form the fluidic or corporeal envelope that is appropriate to the environment in which they find themselves. So here comes a highly evolved spirit, comes down, wants to come down to Earth, maybe on a mission to do something good. The perispirit is very fine, very light, very lucid, very beautiful. Let's imagine it that way. And the spirit decides to come down to Earth. Now, this spirit draws from the environmental fluid surrounding Earth the properties, the fluids that are appropriate for its own perispirit to be denser, to create a new perispirit, denser perispirit, so that it can enter the Earth's atmosphere and actually work here or show itself here, because some mediums can see spirits. This is how spirits of the higher order can manifest themselves to Earth's inhabitants or incarnates. So that's how it goes too, because they make their perispirit denser. All right, so let us move on to item 10. So what we just learned is that the nature of the fluidic envelope always is linked to the nature of our moral development. We've also learned that every every planet has its own environmental fluids, and depending on the density or less density of that environmental fluid, namely of the planet, the spirits have the matching perispirit. Spirits draw the elements for the perispirit from those environmental fluids. Of course, all of it is a form of the universal cosmic fluid. Okay, as a lower order spirit, we don't have free will to go into higher worlds because we don't have the capacity to make our perispirit less dense. However, spirits from higher worlds can come down to lower, more dense worlds and change their perispirit, and they do it via pulling the elements from the environmental fluid that the specific planet they are intending to enter. They draw those elements to form the perispirit, make it denser, let's say if they came down to Earth. All right. Item number 10, the layer of spiritual fluids that surround the Earth may be compared to the lower layers of the atmosphere, which are heavier, denser, and less pure than the upper layers. So now we're learning another distinction. So we've already heard that every planet has its own environmental properties. Now we're hearing it's not just one density of this environmental fluid that a planet is surrounded with. No, it has different properties, different densities. So here what Alan Kardec is saying that the spiritual fluids that surround the Earth could be compared to the atmosphere, to the lower layers of the atmosphere, which is much denser, less pure. And the upper sphere of the spiritual fluids surrounding Earth are less dense. So there's gradations. The closer we're getting to planet Earth, the denser the environmental fluid becomes. These fluids are not homogeneous. They're a mixture of molecules of diverse qualities. So this is really important. So the fluids that are surrounding the Earth are denser in the lower layers and purer, less dense in the upper layers. And there are a mixture of molecules with diverse qualities. The spirits called to live on an environment, let's say Earth, draw their perispirits from it. So the spirits that are called to live in any given environment draw their perispirit from this environment, which is fluidic. And now we just learned different gradations. The further away it is from the planet, the purer it becomes. The closer it gets to the planet, the denser it becomes. However, depending on whether the spirit itself is more purified or less so, its perispirit is formed of purer or denser parts of the fluid suitable for the world where it incarnates. So as there's different layers of the environmental fluid surrounding any planet, let's say planet Earth because we're dwelling here, now comes a spirit drawing from the environmental fluid to form its perispirit. However, the spirit may be very evolved and yet living on Earth. So now, because the spirit is evolved, it pulls the pure molecules, the pure elements of the elemental fluid that surrounds Earth. Because earlier we learned that depending on the developmental state, the moral developmental state of a spirit, depending on that state, the perispirit becomes less dense, purer as the spirit is more evolved, and becomes denser as the spirit is less evolved. Consequently, the spirit is now pulling from these different layers of the environmental fluid. I hope this is clear. I think this is really fascinating. From this, a crucial fact may be drawn. The inner composition of the perispirit is not identical among all the incarnate or discarnate spirits that populate the earth or the space surrounding it. So, in other words, all of us walking the earth have different perispirits. The consistency of our perispirit is unique, is different. And it's different depending on how morally developed we are. So some of us have a much denser perispirit and others have a much finer perispirit. But all of our spirits draw the elements for our to form our perispirit from the environmental fluid surrounding Earth. But as we learned, there is pure layers and there's denser layers. However, the same does not apply to the corporeal body. So this is now different. When it comes to the formation of our physical body, it's different, which, as has been shown, is formed of identical elements. Wow. However highly or little evolved the spirit may be. So this stands in contrast. The fact that our perispirit is made out of purer or denser elements from the environment, depending on our state of development and depending on which world we're the physical body, the corporeal body is formed of identical elements, regardless of our purity or impurity. So all of our bodies are made out of the same elements, but our perispirit is unique to us, depending on our moral development. It's very interesting, isn't it? Okay. So let us see, where were we? The effects produced by the body are the same for everyone, and their needs are the same as well. Every physical body has the same needs. The effects of every body is the same, whereas everybody is different with respect to their perispirit. Fascinating, isn't it? So we're all different in respect to our perispirit, but we're all the same as far as our body's needs, our body's composition, etc. is concerned. A further result, the spiritual envelope of the same spirit changes with its progress in each incarnation, even if it incarnates in the same environment. So if we've had, let's say, 1,000 lives on Earth, obviously we progress morally. As a result of our moral progress, even though life 1 on Earth, our perispirit will be much denser. Hopefully, it will be much less dense in life 1,000 on Earth. We're hopeful that that's what happened. But that will be the logical. The longer the more times we reincarnate, the more we develop, and consequently, our perispirit will change. So this is also interesting. In the exceptional case where high order spirits incarnate on missions on a less evolved world, they have less dense perispirit than the indigenous inhabitants of that world. So if a higher level spirit comes to Earth and incarnates, their perispirit will be much less dense than mine, for example, right? So we now in item 10, we talked about the fluids that are surrounding the Earth. There is denser layers and there's purer layers. The upper layers are pure, the lower layers are denser. And the mixture of molecules have all diverse qualities. So the molecules in those layers have all diverse qualities. The spirits draw purer or denser elements from this environment for their perispirit, and that's depending on their state of development and depending on the world where they incarnate. The composition of the perispirit is not identical among all the incarnates or discarnate spirits populating the Earth or its surrounding, and not just as far as Earth is concerned, also on other planets. So the perispirit is different, every single one, incarnate or discarnate. The corporeal body, on the other hand, is formed of identical elements, regardless of the spiritual purity. And the perispirit of the same spirit changes with its progress in each incarnation. All right, now we're going to item 11. The environment always has to do with the nature of the beings that must live in it. So the environment always has to do with the nature of the beings that must live in it. For example, fish live in water, land beings live in the air, and spirit beings in the spiritual or ethereal fluid, even on earth. So every single being, environment depends on the nature of the being that lives in it. Right? The ethereal fluid is to the needs of spirits what the atmosphere is to the needs of incarnates. So the ethereal is spirits dwell in. It's called the ethereal fluid. It's less dense. So the ethereal fluid is to the needs of spirits what the atmosphere is to the needs of incarnates. We need the atmosphere to be able to live here. The spirits need the ethereal fluid. Just as fish cannot live in the air and land animals cannot live in an atmosphere. Right? So every environment depends on the nature of the being that lives in it, that dwells in it. That is why spirits cannot leave the environment that is suited to their nature. We can't go to the moon as we are. We remember when man stepped on the moon, there was a big moon suit that they had on. You know, they were equipped in order to survive the landing on the moon. So that was, for example, that showed us very tangibly that the atmosphere of the moon was not suitable for us humans without equipment. So it makes sense, right? That is why spirits cannot leave the environment that is suited to their nature. And not just spirits, also fish can't. They can't live on land. You know, bears can't live in the water. We can't live in the water. So we all have our environment. In order to change environments, they must first change their nature. We have to change our nature. Fish have to change their nature in order to live on land. We would have to change our nature to live on the moon, if that's even doable, just as an example. They must rid themselves of the material instincts that keep them in material environments. In other words, they must purify and transform themselves morally. So for us to not be dwelling on earth anymore, we will need to shed our material needs. We have to dematerialize our lives. We talked about that so much in connection with heaven and hell, with our study of heaven and hell, because dematerializing ourselves, morally evolving, underemphasizing material goods and attachments will help us with so much. It also helps us with our discarnation process. It helps us with our life after life. And of course, we have to do that if we don't want to dwell on a material plane anymore, right? Because we can't just flip the switch and live somewhere else. Higher spirits can. They've already gone through all the stage, but we cannot. So we must purify and transform ourselves morally first, which just really shows us, even in this regard, how important our inner transformational work is. And thanks to Spiritism and Kardec Radio, we have no excuse. We have 24/7. We have the opportunity to work on our inner, on our moral development. We can morally transform. We can practice. And we can educate ourselves. We can do the good. Then they will gradually intensify with a more purified, identify with a more purified environment. The less material needs we have, the more we can identify with more purified environments, which becomes a need for us then, a necessity, like the eyes of someone who has lived in darkness for a long time, imperceptibly grow accustomed to the light of day and the brilliance of the sun. So the ethereal fluid is to the needs of spirits what the atmosphere is to the needs of us incarnates. So the environment has to do with the nature of the beings inhabiting it. So for spirits to change environments, The spirits must change their nature. We need to get rid of the material instincts we still have, which keep us in this material environment. And how do we do it? Through our moral purification. Our moral purification helps us to transcend this state, to elevate ourselves, to move on. All right, so that was 11. Now we're moving on to the last, number 12. Let me see whether any questions have emerged. Quickly look. Oh, Victoria is asking about the silver cord. I actually will need to research that. So if I find something, I will get back to you on that. Thank you for asking, Victoria. Anyone else? Any questions? No, not so far. And if any one of you has an answer on the silver cord, do you mean by the silver cord is the connection between our physical bodies and our perispirits? If that's what you mean, then that gets severed upon our discarnation. It's very interesting. In the André Louis books, also Emmanuel talks about it, about meetings that happen in the spirit realm. And he always describes that you can tell who is incarnated and attends those meetings during nighttime, most likely when we sleep. We do, hopefully. And who is discarnated. Because those who are incarnated, the incarnated spirits who appear at spirit meetings, they have the cord that connects them to their physical body that's most likely sleeping somewhere. So that is the last piece to go during discarnation. And once we're discarnated, we don't have that cord anymore, because it's a cord between our perispirit and our physical form. Of course, the perispirit is connected to our physical body, molecule by molecule, which happens during our incarnation. And then in the discarnation process, it happens then molecule by molecule that it gets severed, those ties, those connections. However, there's, of course, we can't really talk about it right now, there's sudden deaths like murders or accidents, and in which case often the spirit hangs around the physical form because it's in shock. It's in shock because, the severance didn't have time to take place. All right, so now we're going to 12. I hope, Victoria, that helped. I'm not sure if it's something else that you refer to. Please let me know. So, thus, everything in the universe is connected. Everything forms a chain. Everything is subject to the grand and harmonious law of unity, from the most physically dense to the most spiritually purified. Beautiful, right? We can see that it's beautiful harmony. It's all organized. It's all beautifully created with perfection. The divine power shines in every part of this grandiose whole. The divine power shines in every part of this grandiose whole. But there are those who have God stooped to the role of stage magician, through childish effects worthy of a sleight-of-hand artist. In the previous chapter, we talked about, and this is what he's alluding to, Alan Kardec alluding to, does God, it was the chapter where we answered the question, where Alan Kardec answered the question for us, does God perform miracles? And the answer was no. God doesn't need to. God is perfect. God doesn't need to lower itself to a place where it needs to become a sleight-of-hand artist, a magician. Because this whole universe is miraculous, and yet it can be explained, and then it isn't a miracle. We'll talk about this here in a second. But essentially, if we look at what we just studied today, how beautiful it's organized, it's orchestrated in harmony and beauty. It all fits perfectly. It's just when we humans, and probably others too, but let's talk about us humans, we're the ones who upset the harmony. And of course, God is all merciful and just, and God in its perfection created the law of cause and effect, where we then will need to live with the consequences of upsetting God's harmony and perfection. Right? We can't upset God's perfection, but we work against the harmony, and then we need to be redirected, realigned. So there are those, Alan Kardec says, who have tried to put God on this level and said, part of it was the religions we learned, because religion's definition is, there need to be miracles for religions to be validated. But God does not perform miracles, doesn't need to. God is miraculous as it is. All right, so faith in serious matters, the faith in God and immortality, has always lived in the human heart. Faith is an innate quality. We learn that in Thought and Life by Emmanuel. We all have faith. Even if we think we don't have faith, we have faith. We don't stress that we won't be able to digest the piece of bread we eat. We wake up in the morning, we kind of expect it, right? We have faith we will wake up. There's so many examples, just most basic examples. But then we can build on that. It's an innate quality. So faith in God and immortality has always lived in the human heart. And even if it has been suffocated under the childish stories that have overburdened it, it reveals itself all the stronger from the moment it is liberated. The spirit is liberated. Like a withered plant rises again as soon as it receives the sun. So even if we in our fog that we're living here, we squelch our faith and we so-called lose our faith, it's living in us. It has always lived in our human hearts. And once we discarnate and we're freed of our physical form, we're like a withered plant that gets watered again, and we awaken to this innate faith, our innate faith. Yes, everything in nature is a miracle, because everything is wonderful and bears witness to the divine wisdom. In that sense, everything is a miracle. All we need to do is go out into nature and marvel at the beauty, how it all just works. So every spring comes and every fall comes and every summer comes, just the seasons alone. We put seeds in the ground and boom, they grow, and the perfect seed, this seed only produces that and the other seed this. So it's like, yes, everything in nature is a miracle, because everything is wonderful and bears witness to the divine wisdom. Such miracles are for the whole world, for all who have eyes to see and ears to hear, not just for a few. We can all bear witness to these miracles surrounding us. A baby being created in the mother's womb, birthed. It's miraculous. So miracles in that sense are everywhere. No, there are no miracles in the sense that has been connected with the word, because everything derives from the eternal laws of creation, and such laws are perfect. So what does he say? On the one hand, everything is miraculous. Everything in nature is a miracle, and everything bears witness to divine wisdom. But there is no miracles based on the definition of the word miracle, which was, a miracle is defined by it's outside of the natural laws. A miracle needs to be supernatural. It is unusual. A miracle needs to be unusual. It needs to be isolated. It can't be reproduced. And it's exceptional. It can't be explained. Can't be reproduced. It's supernatural. It's outside of God's laws. In that sense, nothing is a miracle, because everything derives from natural law. And natural law is the law of God, and the law of God is perfect, doesn't need to prove itself through miracles. So we'll say that again because this is really, really, really important. That's because we're talking, this whole chapter is about miracles, right? And we're deviating into fluids in order to be able to understand that there are really no, it's all explainable, and the fluids are a huge part of that. So one more time, everything is miraculous when we look outside, when we just look at nature. And it's in the sense miraculous because we see the divine wisdom in everything. And then for all to see and for all to hear, not just for a few. They're all accessible to us, those beautiful miracles surrounding us, the sun shining every day. However, when we define miracle as something that's outside of God's laws, that is supernatural, unusual, isolated, exceptional, then nothing is a miracle. Because everything derives from the natural law, from God's law. And they're perfect. Such laws are perfect. Dear friends, this is it. So let us see. Any questions? Mark Hollis, the Old Testament references a silver cord, the connection between the spirit. That's it, via the perispirit. Okay, so then, yeah, people who have had near-death experiences have commented on seeing a silver cord, which is attached from their soul to their body. Exactly. Spiritism tells us this is real and is the conduit between our spirit and our physical body. Exactly, Mark. Thank you so much for helping out. I almost thought that that's what it was. That's why I talked about that. It's very wonderful that you're making that clear, that this is what Victoria was referring to. And for all of us too, to understand that it's called the silver cord. Yes, and you're absolutely right. Spiritism explains that beautifully as well, like miracles, like everything else. So let us close with a prayer. Let us take a deep breath, digesting all this information. Let us say hello to divine providence, to God and His wisdom, His beauty, its clarity, its justice, its mercy, its love, guidance. Dear God, we are so grateful for allowing us to dwell on planet Earth, for meeting here, educating ourselves about the most basic elements of the universe and how it all fits together, how you created this universe and how it works in its mechanisms. We're so grateful to Spiritism, Alan Kardec and the Spirits on High, helping us, taking apart, explaining to us how this universe fits, how the mechanics work, how the fluids are so important in the composition of our bodies, our perispirits, and how they're linked, and what is driving the perispirit, and how we create a perispirit that is less dense thanks to our moral advancement, learning that our physical bodies have the same building elements, same needs, in contrast to varying perispirits. Thank you for all this wisdom coming our way through this enlightening book, Genesis, and this chapter on miracles. Thank you, Jesus, for helping us, modeling how we can transform ourselves morally in the most effective way, showing us of how to become a more loving and kind, benevolent, indulgent, and forgiving human being. And thank you for Kardec Radio, allowing us to nourish our souls, to educate our minds, to meet, to create community. And thank you, dear friends, for joining tonight. And thank you for the mentors who've been guiding us, teaching us, supporting us. And so be it. Dear friends, let me get out of this sharing mode, Here we are. Thank you so much for joining. Let us see. Yes, there's Mark, there's Victoria, and there is Nor Brazil and Tony. Thank you, dear friends. Much love, big hug. And so God willing, we will meet again next week and we will be studying. Let's see. We're moving on to the action of spirits upon the fluids. So how do spirits act on the fluids? We now know the composition, how it all fits together, but now how do spirits act on the fluids? Let us see. We can't wait. God bless you, friends. Good night.